The White House vows to overrule a judge who's blocked Donald Trump's controversial travel restrictions as tensions in the U.S. escalate. Plus,
as we encourage our young people to get involved, I thought it was a beautiful sight.
A U.S. Congresswoman condones the riots at the University of California in Berkeley as protests against Trump's policies become increasingly violent. And after the Louvre attack, all eyes are on the presidential race in France as National Front leader Marine Le Pen and independent candidate Emmanuel Macron hold rallies in Lyon. You're watching RT International, coming to you live from Moscow. I'm Marina Joshi. Welcome to the program. A major legal battle is brewing in the United States after a judge in Seattle temporarily blocked President Trump's travel restrictions. The decision was made after a lawsuit was filed by 2 U.S. states opposed to the ban.
Judge Robart's decision, effective immediately, effective now, puts a halt to President Trump's unconstitutional and unlawful executive order. I want to repeat that. It puts a stop to it immediately.
Now, the White House aims to file an emergency stay on the court's decision, arguing the restrictions make the country safer. And Donald Trump has already expressed his anger over the Seattle judge's ruling, vowing to overturn it. The president called the decision of the, quote, so-called judge ridiculous, and said it takes law enforcement away from the country. Trump's move last week sparked massive protests and resulted in legal confrontations in several states. Let's now take a look at this map right here. You can see the hotspots are mostly found along the coast, with strongholds in New York and Washington, D.C. And in the upper left corner is Seattle. That's where the block and travel restrictions came from. However, now it appears California is leading the revolt against the president's policy, and protests there are taking different forms, as Ganesh Chikan now explains.
San Francisco police suspend ties with the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which had the police working with the FBI for years in counterterrorism efforts. San Francisco authorities say they want to review the guidelines which previously authorized local police officers to gather intelligence on people engaged in First Amendment activities, such as religious services, protests, and political assemblies. With Trump in office, civil rights groups and members of the Muslim community applaud the decision. This is the latest move by San Francisco to try to disengage from the federal government under the Trump administration, especially in regard to the president's directives on immigration. Earlier this week, the city's mayor, police chief, and sheriff wrote a letter to the Department of Homeland Security saying they had no intention to comply with the president's executive orders on immigration and go after undocumented residents. Some Californians demand a so-called Cal-exit as they begin to gather petitions in order to put an initiative on the ballot which could lead to America's most populous state becoming a separate country. Only 31% of Californians voted for Donald Trump in the election, which indicates just how many people there stand against him. The question now is how far Californians are prepared to take their resistance. In Washington, I'm Ganesh Chikan, RT.
Meanwhile, an American congresswoman has dubbed Wednesday's protest at the University of California, Berkeley, which turned violent, a beautiful sight. They broke out shortly before a senior editor of the news website Breitbart was due to give a speech against the so-called sanctuary campuses, which offer protection to undocumented students.
We have seen demonstrations, and I think we've already talked about that around the country. Young people at Berkeley protesting against this unconstitutional order. And so as we encourage our young people to get involved, I thought it was a beautiful sight.
The riot over a planned event at the campus has raised concerns in the media over free speech, and some suggest the protests were somewhat ironic, given that the university considers itself a beacon of the free speech movement.
Berkeley University in California, a place to be and be seen.
Life-shaping, world-changing, future building.
Berkeley.
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 Its official motto is, let there be light. And there was. Isn't the pen mightier than the sword? Seems no one told these students. Extracurricular activities. But there's no expanding of minds here. And all because the guest speaker is a Trump supporter. University is all about discovering your identity, not concealing it.
Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down!
Attempting to be picture perfect can make you a fashion victim, quite literally.
Are you surprised, ma'am?
This is what radical leftism looks like. I absolutely did not know that was going to happen. I should have known better. Like, I came prepared with a hat. Rioters came prepared with mace, batons, you know, assault weapons. Like, I should have actually known.
You know, a cappuccino won't exactly get your point across. Even your soy milk latte just doesn't taste right. Oh, shut up. It's all fine. Just as long as you recycle the debris.
Adding fuel to the current flames are media outlets with their portrayals of the new president. Ever since what many saw as his surprise election victory, Trump's image has dominated front pages, and not exactly in a positive light. Germany's Der Spiegel, for example, picked this picture for its February cover. It depicts Trump beheading the Statue of Liberty ISIL style. The Irish publication Village sparked outrage after it pondered whether the U.S. president should be assassinated, and its cover showing him in the crosshairs of a gun. We got reaction from media and legal analyst Lionel, as well as political satirist Tim Young.
I am shocked. I mean, I understood bad taste, journalistic freedom, but when you have the active, not only the glorification and the suggestion, but the mockery, the comic joy that seems to take place over the notion of our president, my president, the 45th president being assassinated, it defies all logic. What this is a part of, I guess an extension of, this crowd and herd mentality, this psychotic scrum, where people, I guess, are trying to outdo the competitor. And the question is, where does it end?
Depicting Donald Trump as essentially a terrorist that beheaded America is pretty disgusting. I think that a lot of the liberal media is very upset that Hillary Clinton didn't win the last election, so they feel like it's their job then to do whatever it takes politically to stop Donald Trump. And what they've done is they've set up a narrative where violence is okay as well. If you call someone Hitler over and over again, if you call someone a Nazi over and over again, it almost justifies the violence. They're becoming very just completely activist for the left and promoting this violence and protests against our president.
Now, with all the hatred stirred up by the new president, one dating app has decided to capitalize on the divisions. And Miguel Francis Santiago takes a closer look.
I like cute kittens. I like history. I like hiking. But who cares? What matters now is who you hate. You think you've seen it all in the world of matchmaking? Think again. Love through hate is the motto of a new app called Hater. That's right, a Tinder-like dating app that matches you with the people that hate the same things you hate. Just think of the possibilities. Well, let's give it a try, shall we? I hate Wall Street. Oh, look how many haters there are just like me. But no thanks, my wife will not approve of this. And then, of course, the most trending hater topic on the app is, drumroll please, ta-da, President Trump. Which is interesting since the app came out just shortly after Trump took office. But hey, perhaps it's this new wave of hate the country has been engulfed in. Who knows? Like hate crimes, hate speech, and of course, hating Justin Bieber. But the peak of this hate movement was really the 2016 elections. I mean, come on, we had people bashing Trump for hating on Mexicans, women, Muslims, while the Clinton supporters were, of course, hating on the Russians, and even on your average white folk.
Donald Trump, white people.
What exactly has...
So is this a good idea to connect and unite people based on negativity? Remember, there's a fine line between love and hate, but an even finer one between hate and hate crime. So if you're a hater, go get a dog or something. Get some sunshine in your life and lighten up, because there is always room for love. Miguel Francis Santiago, RT.
A massive anti-Trump rally is currently taking place in central London. Thousands have showed up to voice their outrage at the U.S. government's travel ban on the citizens of 7 Muslim-majority countries. It's the latest in a string of protests against Trump in cities around the world. Relations with Donald Trump's America and halting the influx of migrants into Europe dominated the EU summit in Malta on Friday. While criticizing Trump's recent travel restrictions, EU leaders agreed to support Libya and provided with financial assistance to stem the flow of migrants from the country. When asked, the EU's foreign policy chief insisted that Brussels' plan has nothing in common with Trump's initiative.
The agreements we have with Libya, but also with other countries of origin and transit south of Libya, are perfectly done together with the UNHCR and the IOM, meaning the UN agencies dealing with migration and refugees. So the European approach is this: human rights, saving lives, managing the flow with UN agencies. So I guess there are some differences there.
However, the EU's initiative wasn't received well by a number of NGOs working to help refugees in Africa. Doctors Without Borders, for instance, said the EU is ready to sacrifice people's lives just to stop them from reaching Europe. The organization's director general in the Netherlands added that Libya can't be considered a safe place to stay and that the plan makes a mockery of the EU's values. He joined us to discuss the matter further.
What will happen in practice? What seems to me very apparent is that by claiming to save lives on the Mediterranean, they're pushing people back into hellish detention centers, which are in Libya today. So they're not solving a problem; they are most likely exacerbating one for the people that are currently being held against their will and for any arbitrary length under terrible conditions in the detention centers in Libya.
However, the EU leaders themselves seem to be rather proud of the results of the Malta summit. And after deciding on the fate of many migrants, they enjoyed a packed entertainment program.
Such a controversial subject such as migration. We actually finished our meeting on time, showing that there is resolve.
More news after the break.
rewards failure. That's the key to the global economy. Failure gets rewarded. Success gets either gobbled up, merged out of existence, or, in the case of some UK banks, attacked and destroyed willfully to be sold for parts. And now we've got the bad medicine man, Donald Trump, who's coming in like a lunatic. But this could be what is needed, bad medicine.
Most people think to stand out in this business, you need to be the first one on top of the story or the person with the loudest voice or the biggest ratings. In truth, to stand out in the news business, you just need to ask the right questions and demand the right answers. Question more.
Welcome back. You're watching RT. The specter of terrorism again looms large in France after a machete-wielding man shouting "God is great" in Arabic tried to force his way into the Louvre Museum in Paris. The assailant, a 29-year-old Egyptian, managed to wound a soldier before being shot and injured himself. However, despite the clear terror danger to Europe, some politicians are focusing on other perceived threats instead, as Charlotte Dubensky now explains.
Terror has once again come knocking on the door of Paris. This time, though, another tragedy was thankfully avoided. A man wielding a machete targeted a group of soldiers at the city's most visited attraction, the Louvre. He ran at them screaming, "God is great," in Arabic, managing to strike two soldiers before one opened fire and injured him. But while France was under attack, the country's president was busy talking up the strength of his nation.
We in France have a defense policy. We fear nothing.
His message came just as France and much of Europe had seemed to be shifting focus, moving away from the threat of terror to a whole new enemy, Trump's America.
You seem more united on Trump than you are on Russia, so who would you see as the bigger threat?
The only real threat is if we wouldn't be united enough towards challenges. It can change into a real threat if we are not united enough, if we are not courageous enough, that we are united enough to respond properly for these challenges.
And it seems that rhetoric had certainly been striking a chord, at least before this latest attack. People we spoke to back then did indeed think one of Europe's oldest allies had now become a threat.
I think it's the United States.
Donald Trump?
Because you don't know how he wants to manage his politics.
Probably Russia? There. Well, maybe the US right now, since Trump.
Since Trump, right. Oh, he definitely is a threat.
Now that Donald Trump is in charge, maybe it could be a big threat.
Strong opinions just days ago in Paris, but now given this latest threat near the Louvre in the city centre, are people still seeing America as being as big a threat to Europe as terrorism? We've been out onto the streets of the French capital to find out.
What poses a bigger problem, radical Islam or America?
No, Islamic radical.
Radical Islam, of course. We must tackle this problem first of all. Then we can turn to other countries. But above all, we should solve our country's problems.
It's too complicated to be able to equate, I think, those two parts.
I don't think America's a threat.
That is totally ridiculous. EU has problems which are linked to the EU, and this scapegoat policy, blaming Trump, blaming China, blaming Russia, is nonsense. I think in any political analysts would say this is ridiculous. I don't see how Mr. Tusk can say this and keep a straight face. EU has problems because they cannot manage the situation today. The EU is blowing up. It's tearing apart. Don't forget that Great Britain is now going to leave the EU. We've got surveys all across the EU in France and Italy with countries who want to leave the EU. We've got Poland and Hungary who themselves want to have their own policies within the EU. So I think this is more, we're looking at maybe the end of the EU as we know it today.
Meanwhile, the French people will soon be choosing a new leader and a new direction for the future in the country's presidential election scheduled for this spring. The candidate for the National Front, Marine Le Pen, outlined her policy positions on Saturday. One of her proposals is leaving the EU and the single currency if relations with the bloc can't be renegotiated. She also wants to simplify procedures for deporting undocumented migrants and will deny them French citizenship. And concerning the fight against terrorism, Le Pen proposes banning all organizations linked to fundamentalist Islam. Marine Le Pen and independent candidate Emmanuel Macron are holding rallies and meetings in Lyon this weekend. Arrests have been made. And Artiz Isali reports from the city.
The city of Lyon has turned into somewhat of a battleground in the upcoming presidential elections here in France. And today we're seeing two events being held by rival candidates. The National Front party of the anti-EU candidate Marine Le Pen is being held over the course of today and tomorrow. And right now as well, an event has started for the pro-EU candidate Emmanuel Macron, who has emerged as somewhat of a surprise candidate in that presidential election. And actually we have seen many police cars and riot vans driving up and down the streets of Lyon during the course of the day, as security forces are fearful of the two sides and their supporters coming together and perhaps seeing some kind of outbreak of violence between the supporters of the different parties. Now, in terms of that upcoming presidential election, an opinion poll earlier this week held that Emmanuel Macron is in prime position to win that election, and that he's benefiting from the controversy surrounding François Fillon and the scandal around the fact that his wife was given a job, critics say, and paid when really there was no job. It was a false job, so to speak. So they're saying that he's going to pick up the voters who would have voted for Fillon. But actually, other analysts saying that in light of the attempted terrorist attack at the Louvre in Paris, that Marine Le Pen could stand to gain in the sense that she might suggest some more radical proposals to tackle the terrorism threat which has been plaguing France for well over a year now. Policies which some critics have said are similar to those enacted by US President Donald Trump. In any case, it's a very windy day here in Lyon, and the winds of change are certainly sweeping through French politics, and we're going to bring you all of the updates here on RT over the coming days.
Now, in the Ukrainian city of Donetsk, locals are clearing the damage caused by days of shelling. And while last night was relatively calm, many fear it could all erupt again at a moment's notice. The situations remain tense throughout the eastern region in the last few days, with both sides blaming each other for the sudden spike in aggression. Murat Gezdiev is there for us.
The sort of bombardment and shelling that we saw in Donetsk has not been seen here since 2016. You could literally feel explosions through vibrations and through the tremors they cause every few seconds throughout the city. It was mostly the northwestern parts, the northwestern districts that were targeted, but you had sporadic explosions, blasts everywhere.
We first heard a huge explosion. Half of the windows were blown out. Within an hour, we heard a second explosion, which broke the rest of the windows. We rushed out into the corridor. When we returned later, we found several bits of shrapnel in our rooms.
5 schools were apparently hit, according to local authorities. 2 kindergartens, as well as widespread devastation caused to people's homes. There were shops hit as well. The building behind us, there was a particularly large explosion here. The windows have been blown out for hundreds and hundreds of meters around us after a particularly loud explosion here that caused all the car alarms in the city to go off.
Как я не стала сейчас ночевать, а тут вы даже мою вся постель, как тут лежит все мое. Я ж тут жила.
Reconstruction repair efforts are underway. They're cleaning up. The OSC monitors are here. They're looking at the damage. They're cataloguing what has happened, looking at the evidence. Fortunately, however, the shelling seems to have subsided. It's quietened down significantly. We're still hearing about shelling to the south of Donetsk city, but around the city itself, it's very, very quiet.
And up next, it's going underground. To stay with us.